In this video we want to talk about the classical approach to management theory. In fact, we're going to deal with two parts to the classical approach and introduce two parts. We're not going to look at the bureaucratic approach to organizations in this particular video. So let's start. The classical perspective to management emerged during the 19th century and continued into the 20th century. In fact, it could be argued it's still carrying on today. Management theorists are constantly looking at ways in which organizational structures could be improved, ways in which productivity can be enhanced through organizational change. So it's an ongoing process, but the seminal works, the early works, the foundations were planted back in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Due to the new challenges that organizations faced back in the early days of the 20th century, management sought methods of efficiency which included a rational and scientific approach. That was really the main emphasis of the classical approach, to try and understand organizations and try to apply science and apply scientific thinking to organizations so as to maximize the impact the organization would have in the market, its longevity and its efficiency. It's interesting to contrast that particular view of organizations with the view that was common at the time, that science was going to answer all questions, science was going to solve all mankind's problems, and there was going to be new discoveries and new solutions. It was probably related to the fact that the Industrial Revolution had been so recent back in the 1800s and into the 1700s, late 1700s. So there was a view that science was going to be the panacea for all problems, and therefore scientific thinking would solve problems in terms of organization and in terms of industrial production, design, layout, control, and so on. So there was a great belief in this more rational view of organizations. Management practices within the organization. Well, there are three approaches to classical management theory. As I just said, the scientific management approach, the administrative principle as it's called, and bureaucratic organizations. Now we're going to deal with two of these here, and the third one will be the subject of separate videos. So we're not going to get involved with the bureaucratic organizations in this video, but it will appear in other videos, and you should be aware of those and check them out, of course. So let's just deal with the first two. And there are three contributors to this classical approach. The first one is that of Taylor, Frederick Taylor. Now there were others who were proposing a scientific way of looking at the organization, but Taylor adopted scientific management as a principle and set out rules that organizations should follow if they were going to maximize output, minimize costs, and be overall efficient. So we refer to scientific management usually in the context of Taylor, and it's sometimes called Taylorism. Scientific management, or Taylorism, was a scientific method which was used to optimize the way in which tasks were performed, thus improving the labor productivity. So it was looking at the tasks within the organization and trying to rationally propose changes to the way tasks were performed so as to bring them in line with the scientific approach. And the scientific approach, of course, was one in which there would be measurement of output, measurement of inputs. So there were various metrics that Taylorism set out, productivity ones and time and motion and so on. So there was a heavy emphasis on scientific thinking in this particular approach to management theory. One of Taylor's expressions was, in the past, man must have been first. In the future, the system must be first. So it was not looking at the workers. The workers were functionaries within the organization. It was looking at the system itself, looking at the organization itself. That's what concerned Taylor. People were merely there to perform functions, and therefore it was the system that had to be optimized. Now, the general concepts of scientific management, well, developed a standard method for performing a task and train workers to use these methods. So it was work out how to perform a particular task, how to perform it efficiently and properly, and then train the workers how to do that. The managers should work out precise procedures, work out exactly what needs to be done, and then train the workers to perform the task exactly like the way it was worked out by the managers in the earlier phase. So the workers were functionaries. They were there to do specific tasks, do them exactly as set out by the managers, and the managers would have worked out the best way to perform each task, and then train the workers, and the workers would do this over and over and over, and of course thereby gaining more skill in doing the task, and of course becoming more efficient as a consequence. It was necessary to provide the workers with the proper tools needed for the job. So make sure that the workers are adequately equipped, that they've got the proper tools, exactly the right tools to perform the task. The tools are in a convenient place. The work is laid out so as to minimize movement and minimize wasted effort. So it was a very scientific calculation almost as to how to optimize the output. Selected employees were chosen for specific tasks. It was necessary to look at the workforce and look at their particular attributes. Some people may be physically very strong, for example, or mentally very strong, and therefore more suitable to some tasks than others. So it was a question of matching the workforce to the task, making sure that the workers could perform the task. Over and over and over, and would have no issues or problems in working in that manner. Wage incentives were provided when output was increased. It was assumed that the workers just worked for remuneration. They worked for money. So the conditions that they endured at work were broadly ignored, or felt as there was a feeling that they were irrelevant. So the workers worked for wages or salaries, wages typically, and they were quite happy to have a job and to perform the tasks that were asked of them. So this would be the extreme division of labour. This would be workers performing very small tasks, very repetitive tasks, over and over and over, using specialist tools, perhaps standing in the same spot from the time they start work to the time they finish work, and doing it every day. Now, the disadvantages of scientific management. Well, workers felt exploited because their social aspect of life was disregarded. They were treated as machines, not humans. They had no social interaction at work. They didn't have time for social interaction, and their tasks separated them away from the other workers. Management stereotyped workers and did not allow them to prove their skills in other areas. The management would simply select workers to perform particular tasks, and that was it. The workers may have aptitudes and skills to enable them to do different tasks, but they were not considered. They were simply assigned to a task, told what to do, shown what to do, and then left to do it. And generally speaking, they were paid by the amount of work they did. If they were feeling ill or perhaps not on good form on that particular day, it may not produce a lot, in which case they wouldn't receive a lot. So the people were seen as similar to machines. They were not allowed to form innovative ways to perform their tasks. They couldn't innovate what they were told to do. They couldn't change it. The workers may see a better way of performing the task, but they were not allowed to change. They were only permitted to do what was required of them. They were not there to think, in a sense. They were there to perform specific tasks. Now, there were further contributions to scientific management. These were made by Henry Galton, the person who famously came up with the Gantt chart, which is used in planning, in business and planning. Gilbreth, Lillian Gilbreth, and her husband Frank Gilbreth, and they came up with time and motion, and looking at industrial psychology and human resource management. Again, the time and motion one fitted in with the scientific management approach. Each task was timed, each part of the task was timed, so management knew exactly how long it took to complete each task. Again, fits in with the scientific approach. Now, the administrative principle, the second type, I said we're going to do two here, the administrative principle and scientific management. We've looked briefly at scientific management. Let's look at the administrative principle. And by the way, we're not going to deal with, I keep saying, the bureaucratic approach. That will be the subject matter of separate videos. So, the administrative principle was put forward by Fayol, who lived between those dates. Now, this theory dealt with the entire organization, both workers and management, which functioned with four basic principles, which are unity of command, according to this view, so each person receives orders only from one superior. If they receive orders or commands from different superiors, there may be confusion within the system. So there has to be unity of command. There is division of work, specialization and efficiency were incorporated in workers, so that the division of labor, for example, workers would work on small tasks, but do the tasks repetitively and gain a skill from doing the tasks. So they were receiving their orders just from one superior, and they were working on small tasks, but becoming quite efficient at performing those tasks, according to the division of labour. There was also unity of direction. Related activities were grouped under one manager. So the manager would look after perhaps a section, and that section would have particular objectives to meet. So it would have individuals working on small tasks in there. The individuals in there would receive their orders from the manager. They were working on small tasks, so they were becoming quite efficient at performing those tasks, and the manager was responsible for the small section. So the tasks were all related, were all linked. So there was a unity in terms of the direction in which that particular section of the work was moving. And there's also what he termed the scalar chain. The organizational structure starts with the chief executive officer, or with the managing director, or the person who is overall in charge of the business. So it starts there and it ends with the labourers, the people on the shop floor. So there is a scalar structure. It starts with the person at the very top, and the chain of command comes all the way down to the very bottom. And it's possible to trace out exactly who's in between, which managers are responsible for which sections, and so it comes down in a almost a linear fashion. The 5 basic functions or elements of management, the management process, are planning. So it's important, according to this view, to have adequate planning. The work must be organized. The business must be organized. It should be controlled. It should always be under control. Otherwise, it's inefficient, it's out of control, and it may be moving in the wrong direction. So it should be controlled, and it should be coordinated. It should all be linked together. It should all function as a unit. And there should be a commanding role as well, which enables the managers to command what they want. In other words, they're able to specify the tasks that should be carried out, and they should be able to pass orders on to workers and have those orders carried out. So there's a commanding function. So according to this view, there were 5 processes that were needed within businesses. There are further contributions to the administrative principle, and these were made by, for example, Mary Parker Follett. She emphasized the common goals of the employees in reducing organizational conflict and helped management to gain the trust and respect of the employees. So there was a suggestion that the employees and the management had common goals. The employees needed work, they needed remuneration to enable them to live, to buy food and clothing and shelter and survive. But likewise, the management needed the workers, because the management needed to survive as well. So there were commonality between them. And so there was, or there should be, an element of cooperation between both sides, workers and management. Also, Chester Bernard introduced the concept of the informal organization, where management and subordinates group informally to create a bond. According to this view, it's straightforward enough to expect that workers and management will get to know each other. They're working together day in, day out. They will get to know each other, they will talk sometimes, and bonds will be formed between them, because that is their working life. So these are some ideas related to both the administrative principle and scientific management. And these, of course, are subject matter of separate videos as well. But as I said earlier, a couple of times now, I've left out the bureaucratic approach, which is the subject matter of separate videos and should be sought out as well. That's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.